The video you are about to watch contains violence and graphic descriptions that may be very disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. The little girl thought that she was accompanying a frail old man to a birthday party for kids. That was the last time her parents saw her. A letter arrived years later to the grieving parents, retrieved by the Missing Persons Bureau of New York City. As Mr. and Mrs. Budd read the paper, they broke down in tears in utter dismay. The letter explained in horrific detail what had happened to their missing 10-year-old daughter, Grace. The letter was a confession from the killer on how he tortured, mutilated, murdered, and then ate his victim. This chilling message was written by a monster that preyed on kids. The killer was a gray old man named Albert Fish. He would become known by other names such as the Boogeyman, the Brooklyn Vampire, the Werewolf of Wisteria, the Moon Maniac, and most popularly, the Gray Man. He became one of the most despicable serial killers in American history. This is his story. Before we continue, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss future stories. Hamilton Howard, who later chose to go by the name Albert Fish, was born on May 19, 1870 in Washington, D.C. Born to Randall and Ellen, Albert was born when his father was 75 years old. Before Albert got to the age of 5, he lost his dad. His mother was unable to look after him due to the unfavorable economy, so Albert was sent off to an orphanage. There, Albert was subjected to beating and maltreatment by older boys, but something was wrong. Albert began to enjoy these beatings. He derived sexual satisfaction from the whipping and almost looked forward to them. After 4 years in the orphanage, Ellen got a job and came back for Albert. At a young age, Albert indulged in sexual depravity with a telegraph boy, indulging in the vilest acts such as drinking urine and eating fecal matter. He often hung out at public bathing rooms to watch young boys have their bath. At the age of 11, Albert had an accident that may have been the cause of a pronounced stutter and frequent headaches. He fell from a cherry tree and landed in such a terrifying way that after that, things became a little different. In 1890, Albert's mother moved with him to New York City. Many claim that he became a male prostitute, and yet he also worked as a painter and a paper hanger. During his free time, he sought out kids to molest, especially those around the ages of 6, and also liked to write dirty letters to women whose contacts he found in newspapers and magazines. Albert's mother, who needed a grandchild, found a wife for Albert. Her name was Anna Mary Hoffman. Albert conceded, and with Anna, he had 6 children, though he continued to have illicit affairs with a few male lovers. His life was about to take an unexpected turn. Albert Fish was arrested in 1903 for financial crimes within the category of embezzlement and was incarcerated in Sing Sing prison. That was where he explored the depths of his depravities with other men. Upon his release from prison, he was no longer the man his kids once knew. He claimed to hear voices and saw things that weren't there. He believed that he was chosen by God to become something greater, a vessel to deliver punishment to kids. He believed himself to be a religious man and administered penance by beating himself with a nail-studded paddle. He claimed that the pain cleansed him. Albert began a secret relationship with a 19-year-old boy who was mentally challenged. What began with sadomasochistic sex quickly deteriorated into senseless torture, with Albert doing all the torturing. It ended with Fish cutting off the boy's penis and leaving him to bleed out and die. In 1917, Albert had grown distant from his wife, so she left him with their 6 children and took a large portion of their property. At that point, Fish took his insanity to a whole new level. His children recounted seeing their father in a very awkward position. While completely naked, he would strike himself with a wooden paddle and stick a needle through his penis to achieve sexual gratification. This greatly troubled his children, but curiously, he was never violent towards them. He often ate raw meat and served it to his kids, who didn't think much of it at that time, believing their father to be a bit unconventional. But over time, fish developed a taste for a different kind of meat, human flesh. In 1919, Albert set out to quell his hunger and depravity by abducting, abusing, and killing little boys. His victims were typically the mentally impaired or the blacks who resided in areas of extreme poverty. This was because the police would be less likely to follow up on the case. Albert would lure the kids out by offering them gifts such as candy or toys. In July 1924, Albert caught sight of a young girl in Staten Island. He lured the girl with gifts, asking her to come help him pick rhubarb. He was quickly spotted by the mother, who quickly called her daughter in. He left immediately, but came back later and hid in the barn. This time, her father chased him off with a weapon, threatening his life. He continued to try his luck with the poor children of the neighborhood until he came across a young boy, Francis McDonald, the son of a police officer from Staten Island. The 8-year-old boy was abducted while playing football with his friends. When the other boys discovered that Francis was missing, they ran for help, and a group of men began scouring the neighborhood in search of the boy. The only clue that they had was that a gray old man had been hovering around them for longer than necessary. The 8-year-old's body was later discovered by some scout boys on duty. It was deliberately hidden under a pile of leaves on an old property. The body was naked from the waist down and showed signs of sexual assault and then strangulation. An autopsy showed that the boy had eaten raisins before he was murdered. This was how Albert lured his victim. The coroner was unsure that an elderly man could inflict such levels of bodily harm on a young boy and dismissed the thought. Whoever did this must have been in his prime, he thought. This, of course, sent chills through the state. There was a killer on the loose, and this particular killer preyed on kids. Several people who fit the profile were arrested, but later released. As the case began to grow cold, Gray Man was still out there. Nothing happened for a while, and then he struck again. On May 25th, a young man, 18 years of age, named Edward Budd, placed an advert in the New York World newspaper. He was in search of employment. Just 3 days later, employment found him. A gray old man showed up at Edward's doorstep by the name of Frank Howard. He had come to offer employment to young Edward on his farm. When Edward showed up with his friend William, Frank Howard offered both boys a job at his farm in Long Island. Both boys were excited about the opportunity. Howard was supposed to pick them up on Saturday, but he never came. Rather, a telegram came in his stead, saying that he would come the next day as he needed to tend to some business. Howard came the next day, which was a Sunday. He did something very peculiar. He asked for the telegram that the family had received the previous day. When they handed it to him, he slipped it in his pocket. No one gave it a second thought. The family invited Howard for lunch before he would set out with the boys. It was during lunch that Howard took a good look at Grace Budd, the 8-year-old daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Budd. She was clad in the prettiest Sunday dress. Howard was instantly infatuated. He engaged the 8-year-old in conversations, telling her how beautiful she was and how she reminded him of his kids. In his generosity, he offered her 50 cents to buy candy for herself and her sister. Grace's mother gave her consent, and Grace skipped off with her earnings. Whatever Howard's plan was initially, it changed when he saw little Grace. He suddenly came up with another story. He told the Budds that he wanted to quickly attend his niece's birthday party that afternoon. Therefore, he would pick the boys up in the evening and be on their merry way. Just as he was about to leave, he acted as if he had had an afterthought. He turned and asked if Grace could accompany him to the kids' birthday party. He persuaded them with sweet words, saying that there would be lots of food, games, and fun for kids her age. He promised to have her back by 9 o'clock. Mrs. Budd hesitated, as Howard was still only a stranger, but Mr. Budd, who was more trusting and saw Howard as a kind old man, gave his permission. Howard had told them that the party was to be held at 137th Street, Columbus Avenue. Unfortunately, the Budds were unaware that Columbus ended at 110th Street. This address did not exist. Grace dressed in her best attire and followed the gray old man to his destination. She never came home again. On Monday morning, the police were alerted, and a search began for the gray old man who had abducted their daughter. The family had a detailed description of his appearance, and in no time there were flyers with his face across the country. The case was long, and the search even longer, but there were no leads on the old man. Just when the family had almost lost hope, a letter came in November 1934, which was confirmed to be written by Albert Fish. It was addressed to the Budd family, and the details were gruesome. The letter read, "When I grabbed her, she said she would tell her mother. I stripped her naked. She began to kick, bite, and scratch. I choked her to death and cut her flesh into small pieces to take to my rooms. And then I cooked and ate the flesh. How sweet and tender she was when I roasted the meat in my oven. It took me 9 days to eat her whole." The handwriting on the letter wasn't enough to provide any leads, but the address on the envelope was. The initials NYPCBA meant New York Private Chauffeurs Benevolent Association. The police made inquiries and found that one of the janitors at the association had taken some envelopes home at 622 Lexington Avenue. After the police checked the address and found no signs of Albert, the janitor remembered that the man actually moved from East 52nd Street to 622 Lexington Avenue. The police contacted the landlady of the establishment and found out that the monster did live in this building and signed his name as Albert H. Fish. Now, Albert often got support checks from his son, which the landlady collected on his behalf and held on to until Albert came to collect. Upon hearing this news, the police told the landlady to inform them whenever Albert came around. One fateful day, Albert came for his check. The landlady informed the police, and in no time, Albert was cornered and taken into custody. On March 11, 1935, Albert Fish's trial began. It lasted for 10 days, most of which Fish spent no interest in the court proceedings. He often shut his eyes or stared into the distance, often carried away. While the defense argued insanity, the prosecution proved beyond doubt that Albert Fish was fully sane and very calculated in his killing approach. He was eventually found guilty of first-degree murder and was sentenced to execution in the chair. At 11:06 p.m. on January 16, 1936, Albert Fish was taken to the electric chair at Sing Sing for execution. He was strapped in, and within minutes, thousands of volts surged through his body, putting the gray man away forever. The Budd family had gotten some semblance of justice for their pain, and the world was finally rid of the horrible cannibalistic monster that preyed on children. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. If you would like to know how a sweet young couple out on a date met their end in the hands of 5 depraved abductors, click on this video.